we become a follower of Jesus, or a disciple of Jesus, as we call them, we begin to start seeing things differently in life. Now we have the ability to see the world through supernatural eyes instead of just natural eyes. And because of that, we begin to change, slowly to be sure, but change is inevitable if we're a true follower of Christ. Today we're going to continue talking about the disciples. Can't seem to get to a verse in Luke yet, but there's so many lessons that we're learning about these men that they give their lives to follow Jesus, and there's lots of things we can learn from them. Today is another longer lesson than normal. I couldn't seem to break this one up either, but join us today as we see what happens when we begin to follow Jesus and what to do about those who are the people around us who can't seem to understand what our new faith is all about. Join us today. Last Friday, we had another grandbaby. Yay! A little boy, Colton. And it was kind of funny because Colton is a baby. His sister is, how old is Sierra now? Almost 10. She is 10. So there's a big, big age gap between the two of them. And because I don't watch my grandchildren like I'm the most pathetic grandparent. But so I went there, and the other grandmother was there at the hospital. So I was like, you are such a nice grandmother. You're awesome. Like, what in the world do you do with these grandkids when they come over? And she's like, oh, we play cards and we play games. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what a nightmare. Okay, like I would be so bad at that. So that's why God made certain people grandmothers. So I found this, and I wanted to read it to you. It's in your handout. What is a Grandmother by a third grader? I thought it was kind of cute because I realized either this is what I have to look forward to, or this is what what to dread in my life. I'm not sure. So, a grandmother is a lady who has no children of her own. She likes other people's little girls and boys, which actually that sounds kind of creepy. A grandfather is a man grandmother. He goes for walks with boys, and they talk about fishing and stuff like that. Grandmothers don't have to do anything except be there. They're old, so they shouldn't play hard or run. It is enough if they drive us to the market where the pretend horse is and have a lot of dimes ready. I thought that was funny because I'm thinking, dimes? Do you think they even have those anymore? And are they dimes, or are they quarters or dollars? Like, who knows nowadays? Or if they take us for a walk, they should slow down past things like pretty leaves and caterpillars, and they should never say, hurry up. Usually grandmothers are fat, but not too fat to tie your shoes. They wear glasses and funny underwear, and they can take their teeth and their gums out. Okay, now we're kind of getting the idea of is grandmotherhood, okay? This is what I guess I'm supposed to be looking forward to. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. Grandmothers don't have to be smart. They only have to answer questions like, why isn't God married? And how come dogs chase cats? Grandmothers don't talk baby talk like visitors do because it's hard to understand. When they read to us, they don't skip or mind if it is the same story over and over again. Isn't that so true? Everybody should try to have a grandmother, especially if you don't have television, because they are the only grown-ups who have time. Aww. I thought that, okay. So then when they said that last statement, it made me feel better because I thought, okay, I just don't have time. That's my problem because, and I always use this as my excuse, we still have kids at home. So we have our 15-and-a-half and our 18-year-old at home. And because we're not dealing with grandparent issues, we're dealing with kid issues. So Cheyenne is 18. She has a boyfriend. I told you that last week. And he came over for dinner on Tuesday. Now, remember last week I told you she got the homecoming queen thing and then the dance, and he couldn't go because she was sick, and we did that whole thing. So Tuesday, he comes over for dinner, and he goes, we were talking about texting. And he said, yeah, you should see the text that Cheyenne sent me today. And she started laughing, and she goes, yeah, you know how it does those auto words, and it puts in a word that really isn't supposed to be there? So she sends him a text that says, I want to give you a kiss, okay? And it came out, I want to give you a kid. And he's looking at it like, serious? Cheyenne's like really changed since she won Homecoming Queen. Okay, so Rob saw this shirt. Someone put it on Facebook. It was so cute. He goes, I want one of those, and I want Grant to have it, which is her boyfriend. It's on your thing. Rules for dating my daughter. Get a job. 2, understand I don't like you. 3, I'm everywhere. 4, you hurt her, I hurt you. 5, be home 30 minutes early. 6, get a lawyer. I thought that was great. 7, if you lie to me, I will find out. 8, she's my princess, not your conquest. 9, I don't mind going back to jail. And 10, whatever you do to her, I will do to you. So I thought that's great. So that's why apparently I'm not a very good grandmother, because I'm still dealing with adults, children, okay? Today I want to talk about 3 different kinds of people. And I want to talk about disciples. You and I are, if we're a follower of Jesus, we are what is called a disciple, which means it's not a modern day Christian, what people call the word Christian. It's someone who's a learner, a follower. They grow in their faith. That's just what happens when you become a disciple. And so I want to talk about if you're here and maybe you're new to all this. You're like, I just got saved maybe a week ago or a month ago, or this is all new to me. My friend brought me, and I know I want to know Jesus, but I'm just kind of new at this. I want to talk to you first. And then I'm going to talk to you that if you have been a disciple for a while or a follower of Christ, but you're so stressed out because somewhere along the line, people tell you, you have to do this and you have to do that, and you're going just crazy. And so we're going to help you. And then I want to talk to the last group, which is those that are changing, because when you start changing, the world around you starts changing. And I didn't know that when I became a Christian, and so I want you to be able to know that the changes that are happening are good, and it's not like menopause either. So okay, so I want to start today with something that I heard this week, because I think the problem is that when you and I become a Christian, someone says, hey, if you want to know Jesus, come up front, raise your hand, say a prayer, ask Jesus in your heart, whatever that looks like for you. Could happen in any way. But I think sometimes we forget where that began. Sometimes we think like, well, I was just smart enough to choose Jesus. I was just smart. Someone gave me a book and I'm like, yeah, praise the Lord, I want to know him. But we need to go back even further, and this is the verse that I want to go off of real quick. Matthew 13, 15 through 16. Your handout. For the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and return, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. And I want to just say today that if you are here and you are a follower of Christ, I don't think and I'm saying this for me too, we realize how blessed we really are, because most of the world isn't like that. They don't understand anything because they don't see through spiritual eyes like we see. Like we see the world completely different than they did. I think we talk a lot about what it means to be a disciple, but I don't think we remember that we wouldn't be a disciple if God had not called us. So here's a few verses. John 6:65, and he said this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him, unless he is enabled to do so by the Father. He's saying you and I would never even have come to him and said, Jesus, come into my life, had it not been for God drawing us, wooing us, opening our eyes to see that. And because of that, we are really, really blessed. Like God says, you are blessed because you have eyes that can see that. Ephesians 2:8, for it is by free grace, God's unmerited favor, that you are saved, delivered from judgment, and made partakers of Christ's salvation through your faith. And this salvation is not of yourself, of your own doing. It came not through your own striving, but it is a gift of God. And somehow we tend to forget that. And I think the one thing I want to say, as a follower of Christ, we need to turn back and say, God, thank you, because you saved me. I walk through the house sometimes and I'm just like, God, I don't know why you saved me. I have no idea. I'm so grateful that you opened my eyes to be able to see this truth. And what it does is it pushes me to want to serve him because he saved me. And it's a whole different view than thinking like, I was just smart enough and, God's lucky if I go to church on the weekend and, if I pick up my Bible, he should be thankful for that. Instead of looking at it like we are so incredibly blessed because God has opened our eyes and saved us. So for you, if you're new at this, what happens is that God draws you to himself. And that could happen in a million different ways. Someone could just be like, hey, come to church with me. And you hear something and you're like, oh my gosh, I need Jesus in my life. Someone could have given you a book. Could be a neighbor. Could be a friend. Maybe you were here and you saw one of the coupons that we had, or you saw a flyer, whatever. Somehow God attaches you to something, and then you start going, you know what, I really do want to know what the Bible means. I don't have no idea. And that's God just starting to draw you. And so that's kind of the first step. And I want to tell you that once you do become a follower of Christ, everything's going to change. And I want to prepare you for that because a lot of people don't know that. And what's going to happen is your family and your friends, your coworkers, your grandchildren, your children, your husband possibly, your boyfriend possibly, are going to think you're crazy. They just are, because now you can't live the same way that you used to. And now everyone thinks you're a nutcase. And you're going, I didn't know this was part of following Jesus, and I want you to know that it really is, and you're going to want to talk about him, and they roll their eyes at you, and I want you to understand that the reason is because God has blessed you to see something that they can't see, and because of that, your life is going to change. Now, what you're going to come upon also is you're going to start going on vacation and taking your Bible, and people will be like, why would you read your Bible? That's so boring. And why would you do that? I don't know. I just have to know God. And that's how I'm going to know him. I'm going to read my Bible. They're going to say, we're going to the lake this weekend. Come with me. Yeah, they're doing this really great series at church. I can't miss it. What? Are you totally crazy? No, just kind of like this Jesus thing right now. I got to get to know him. That's just part of it. And then suddenly something bad will happen to you. And all your friends are falling apart because they can't believe this. But you have this joy about you, and you're like, yeah, I don't know why it happened. I know God does. I'm his child. He loves me. So somehow so we can be joyful, and people will not understand that. And then say you go to a funeral of someone that you know was a strong believer, and you're not sad. You're sad because you'll miss them, but you're so excited because you're like, I know where they're going. I've read the end. I've read what heaven's like. This is so exciting for them because someday I'm joining them. Okay, the world, the people of the world cannot understand that. And so they think you and me are crazy. And I didn't know this. When I first decided, when I followed God, when I came to Christ, there was a long period of time where I really didn't know what it meant. And I always tell you, in Cabo, I opened a book and read a verse, and God opened my eyes, and it changed my life completely. But I noticed that people around me were like, what's wrong with her? So I heard a woman teach a Bible study, and I asked her if I could meet with her. And I went out there in tears in Gilbert, and I said, what's wrong with me? Like, something is seriously wrong with me, because nobody told me that people are going to think you're crazy. They just are. And that's normal. And so I want you to know that when that does happen, I don't want you to be down about it and think like, everyone hates me. No, that's just normal. Because, and always go back to this, because God has blessed you with the eyes to see that most people do not see. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. And I think the other thing, too, that's going to happen to you is that you're suddenly going to have this urgency to start telling people about Jesus, because now you're reading your Bible and you see like, okay, now there's two destinations, heaven and hell. And if you don't know Jesus, you're going to hell. And your destination, your address has changed from like south Hell Street to North Heaven Street, let's just say. Okay, so your destination has changed, and suddenly now it's imperative that other people see what you see too. I realized this the other day. We have frogs at our house. I can't remember if I told you this. We have, and they're big frogs, and they're loud, and they're noisy, and they live in our pond. And when they mate or whatever they do, I have no idea what they do, they scream like, but this will go on all night long, and there's probably 50 of them. Okay, so it's so loud that we have to shut our doors. And if people come over, they're like, it sounds like babies are being murdered, like literally. And we live in this weird, like, middle of nowhere, so they're convinced that I don't know what they think. So anyway, we keep saying, no, it's just the frogs. It's just the frogs. So when they do have their little babies, there's 500, 1,000 little baby frogs. They're so stinking cute. But the problem is they don't live very long because the lawnmower runs them over. We step on them. We run them over. I mean, they're just all over the place. And so my job is to save the frogs because they're so cute, and I want to see how many will make it out. And really, honestly, there's out of the 1,000, let's just say, there's maybe 5 that actually grow. They all just die. It's so sad. Anyway, the other day, we're sitting outside, and we have our pool, and we have the hose for the cleaner. And I looked out, and all these frogs are lined up on the pool. And I was like, oh, Rob, they're all going to drown if I don't save them. So I became a frog saver. And so I got my little red Solo cup out, and I would go and I would put them in the pond, save them, and that was my job. And it dawned on me that that's kind of our job, like not to save frogs, but to save people. Because suddenly we'll start looking at people not like, they're here, but they're sitting on this pool thing, and if I don't rescue them, they're going to fall and drown and die and go to hell. And we don't want them to do that. So our job, but it doesn't happen at the beginning. You're probably like, I just became a Christian, couldn't care less if anyone gets saved. But eventually it will happen, and when it does, I want you to be prepared for that. So as a disciple, that's just what happens. Now, I want to show you that when we become a Christian, or when we become a follower of Christ, most of the people around us look at the world just in the natural, what they see. I see that tree. I see that accident this morning. I see someone got sick and went to the hospital. I see a tragedy. Whatever it is, they just see it as something bad, something tragic, to where when you and I look at things, we don't look at it in the natural all the time. We now have added the supernatural to it. So we take a situation that the world thinks and add God into it, and now we see things completely different. Look in the Old Testament, there's a story about Elisha. And the king of Aram, he was trying to get Elisha and capture him. And so it's in your handout, verse 13. It says, so he, which is the king, said, go and see where Elisha is, that I may send and take him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. So he, the king, sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now when the attendant of the man of God, so Elisha's servant or man that was with him, had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city, and his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those that are with them. Okay, now think about that. Here you are, you're going, okay, there's Elisha and the servant in this house, and the whole city is surrounded, and Elisha's going, yeah, there's more of us than them. And the guys go, are you joking? Like, that's just you and me. How does this play out? And look what he says in verse 17. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountains was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So see, there's this whole supernatural world out there that you and I can't see, but as a believer, we can tap into because we have this really awesome God who saved us, and we believe that. But people in the world do not. See, we believe God still works miracles, and we believe that the Holy Spirit, which is God, lives within us, and he's changing us, and he leads us, and he guides us, and he goes before us, and that anything that happens, I know his hand is in it because I am a child of God. We know that. Most people don't get that. And when they don't, they're going to think that you and I are totally crazy. My son three of my kids went to Mexico this last weekend to build homes down in Mexico. And our oldest son, Robbie, said, Mom, we built a home for a husband and wife, and they had a little boy. She was not a Christian at all. And her son was very, very sick. I think he was probably around 5 years old. He couldn't eat. He was malnutritioned. He was very skinny. Took him to the doctor. Healthcare is not that great. They said, just go home and hug him and love him. He's going to die. Like we can't do anything about this. So she picked him up and she took him, and she said, instead of going home, I went to a church. She wasn't a Christian. She walked in. She said to the pastor, I need you to pray. My son is so sick. And he prayed for the son to get better and that she would find Christ. And she became a Christian. She said, I'm following Jesus, whatever this looks like. Okay, so she gets saved, walks out, and as they're going home, she's carrying her son, and he says, Mommy, I want you to put me down. I want to walk. And she's like, okay, puts him down, walks him. The minute they get in the house, he says, Mom, I'm hungry. I want to eat. Okay? And God completely healed this child. I asked Robbie, how old is he now? He says he's 23. He has his own family. But it was this moment that people that look at that from the outside would say, oh, that's karma, or that's just circumstantial, whatever, coincidence. And yet as a believer, it's not. It's God, because that's how awesome God is for us. So I just want to remind you that we're very blessed to be able to see this. And when somebody treats you bad because of your faith, now you can get a different perspective. You don't have to be like, oh, you're such a jerk. How come you can't see what I see? And they can't. They honestly can't. And now that we know that, we can be so gracious and loving and kind to people who really don't see what we see. So it kind of helps because we have a spiritual lens on, they don't. So, okay, continue on. Part of being a disciple is this other thought that when you and I come to Christ, we start out like down here. And then we have to grow. But I want you to know that as we're growing, we don't always get it right. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do stupid stuff. We're going to disappoint God. And we see that because the original disciples, the exact same thing happened to them too. And I want us to remember that the disciples spent 3 years with Jesus, 3 years. And they didn't see anything like you and I see. Like they literally saw dead people rising, demons being cast out. They got to see miraculous things, walking on the water, calming the sea. And yet, they still did not get it. Look at this scene here in Matthew 26. It's after they've been with Jesus about 3 years. Then Jesus came, and he's getting ready to go to the cross. He says, to a place called Gethsemane, and said to his disciples, sit here while I go over and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, began to be grieved and distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, so you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he went away again a second time and prayed, saying, my Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done. Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them again and went away and prayed a third time, saying the same thing once more. Then he came to his disciples and said, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. Behold, the one who betrays me is at hand. So I want to just try to encourage you, for those of you that are here, then you're like, I have just let Jesus down once again. And I want you to see that the disciples did the exact same thing. Like they just did. We've got to get that we're not perfect. And if we don't understand that, this whole Christian thing isn't going to work because you're going to start feeling piles and piles of condemnation on you all the time. And Jesus is like, the guys who spent 3 years with me, I asked them to do something like don't fall asleep and pray, and they fell sound asleep. And I want you to know that that's just part of being a disciple. And I want you to feel better. So it's comforting to me. Because I think Jesus could have gone to him and said, really? You guys are so pathetic. How could you do that to me? I'm getting ready to go to the cross. I've done so much for you, and you're sleeping. What do you think this is? How about for us? You gossiped again? Serious? Like, I'm just done with you. I'm just sick of your gossip. What about you drank too much? Maybe you drank too much one night, and God's like, okay, I'm done. You just drank too much. He doesn't do that, okay? You talk to this person in a really awful way, okay? Yeah, well, that happens sometimes. And yet, the great thing about Jesus is he never kicks him out of the fold. He never says, I'm done with you. He just says, I understand. I understand because you're human. You're not God. You get tired. You get grumpy, I might add, really hormonal for women. We have hard days. We get annoyed with someone. I think I put this in your little thing. I found this little e-card. I thought it was kind of cute. This man's looking at this woman and he says, from the moment I first saw you, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life avoiding you. I thought that was so cute. But, okay, as followers of Jesus, there's going to be people in our life that we're going to feel that way about, okay? And we have to deal with that, and granted. But I want us to remember that even the closest people to Jesus acted human and did stupid stuff, and it's going to happen to us. And I think a lot of the problem, too, is that when you first come to Christ, you don't understand the whole story. And for the disciples, they had no idea what the whole story was going to be. They could not grasp the concept of trusting him. They couldn't grasp when he would say, "Oh, in 3 days I'm gonna die and then raise again." They're like, "What are you talking about?" Like it made no sense to them whatsoever. He spoke in parables. Okay, if I got up here and spoke in parables, you'd be like, I have no idea what you're saying. And he did that to them because he knew that there were some people that had eyes to see and ears to hear, that it would make sense, other people it wouldn't. So, and I want to just let you know that part of following Jesus says this: it takes years and years and years to grow up in our faith. And when we know that, then we can be really, really patient to those around us that are baby Christians. Because I will tell you, I used to be a jerk. When this whole thing, God started changing my life, and I would read my Bible and I would read books, and I had to learn everything I could. But my problem is I thought everyone else should be like me. And my problem was God was just wanting me to teach. And in order to do that, I had to do those things, but that's not everyone's deal. And so I was kind of like, I could be judgmental and legalistic, and I was just a jerk, okay? So I've learned now that everyone starts out really, really small, and they grow, but they grow on God's timing, not my timing. And so now when you see someone that's not growing in their faith fast enough, we can be the most compassionate, loving people because we know that. We know how God has been with us. I was talking to my son Micah the other day, and I want to talk now about the people that are the constantly stressed disciples. Because he said, Mom, I have this friend, and he stresses me out because he's constantly, I need to go do this for God, I have to go do this, and I have to read my Bible, and I have to read this book, and I have to do this, and you're just, because sometimes you'll go to churches, and they'll start heaping all of these things that you have to do on you. And then you start feeling guilty, like, I can't keep up with this. And a lot of people walk away because they're like, this is just not even fun. Like, if the abundant life in Jesus means this, no thank you. It can be so stressful. So he told his friend, he goes, Mom, I told him to go plant a tree in his backyard. And I said, okay. And he said, here's my thinking. Plant a tree, water it, do whatever you need to do to it. It's going to grow when it's ready to grow. Like, you're not, just by standing and looking at it, praying over it, feeding it chocolate, whatever you do, it's not going to grow until it's ready to grow. And he said, I wanted him to know that it has to go through a lot of things before it grows. Like, you plant a seed in the dark, and then it sprouts out. Now it's in the light, but now it's a little sprout, and then it has to have wind and hail and rain and all these things that have to happen to this little thing so that its roots can grow deep, and then it'll take off when it's ready to. And that's how it works with a tree. And he said, I wanted my friend to realize that that's how it works as a Christian too. He goes, Mom, think of a redwood tree. He said, a redwood tree, if you had this big, huge redwood tree and this little tiny sprout of a redwood tree, I think I even put a picture of a redwood tree in there, the little sprout would be like, I'm never going to be grown up like that. Well, yeah, you are. It just takes years. That picture in there, it is called, the tree is called General Sherman. It is the biggest giant sequoia in the world. It is 274.9 feet tall, monster tree. It took 2,000 to 3,000 years for that tree to grow. Okay, so all that to say that it takes a whole lot of time for you and I as believers to grow, and we're not going to change overnight, and we're going to disappoint God, and that's just what we're going to do. I want you to remember John 15:5. It's not in your handout. I thought about this morning. The Bible says, Jesus said, I'm the vine and you are the branches. If you abide in me, you're going to bear much fruit. Now, abiding means clinging to, remaining in. It doesn't mean working and running around like you're chicken with your head cut off. It doesn't mean that. It means spending the time to know him, and then he starts working on the inside of you and changing you, and then all this good stuff starts coming out, not because you're running around trying to do all these things for him, but because you've spent the time with him to grow your roots deep into the ground. The other thing that Micah said that was kind of important, he said, Mom, what I wanted my friend to know is this. Here's my tree analogy up here. He said that Joyce Meyer, and I thought about this too as he was telling me, Joyce Meyer always says there's a difference between your who and your do. Okay, if you ever listen to her, she says that. Who you are and what you do are really two different things. And so I wanted us to see that today, that when God sees us, so this may be us, okay, so we become a Christian and we're this little baby tiny tree, and we're still here, and we're trying to grow, and we get that because we know we need to. If you're not growing and if you're stuck on this little thing, then you got issues. Then you need to say, what's wrong with me? But most people, when they become a Christian, then they start growing and they read their Bible and they change and all that stuff. And this is you when you're all done. But Micah said, you know what, Mom? He said, people need to know that this is how Jesus, or that God looks at us when he looks at us. He doesn't look at us like this and we're struggling and we act like brats and we act like spoiled little kids. He looks at us like this, a full-grown tree. And so I put some verses in here for you. 1 John 3:1. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that's what we are. See, when God looks at us, he doesn't look at us like a spoiled little brat. He looks at us like a full-grown, you are my child. Nothing's going to change that. Romans 8:17. Now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. Okay, think about that. We're an heir to his throne. Like, that's the coolest thing in the entire world. So when he sees us, he's not saying, you're just, I may just kick you out of my will. No, he doesn't say that. He goes, you are my children, you are my heirs. And then look in 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made him, Christ, who knew no sin, to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. So we have to get this, because if you don't get this, then you're going to run around thinking God's mad at you, he hates you, you can't do enough, and you're going to be stressed, and you're going to give up on your faith. This is how he sees you: righteous, his child, his heir. That's how he looks at you. Now the problem is that we still have to live in this world and grow, but if you were to die today in this state, he looks at you in this state. And when we get that, it's like, okay, that's so cool. Like, he looks at me differently than I look at myself. So we are, he sees us white as snow. He sees us as the finished product is that, and that's good news. Now look at Colossians 2:6-7. As you therefore have received Christ, even Jesus the Lord, so walk, regulate your lives, and conduct yourselves in union with and conformity to him. So see, that's our job. He's saying, if you've received Jesus into your life, what's going to change is now you're going to start conforming to his ways more than you are the world's ways. That's just what's going to happen. I like this with our tree analogy. 7, have the roots of your being firmly and deeply planted in him, fixed and founded in him, being continually built up in him, becoming increasingly more confirmed and established in the faith, just as you were taught, and abounding and overflowing in it with thanksgiving. Now, I like those two words: increasingly more, continually built, not because you have to make God love you, but because that's how you're going to get your roots really, really deep. And the more deeper they go, anything can happen to you, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. God's got this under control. Financially, relationally, whatever. You just don't worry about stuff like you used to, because your roots are so deep, and that's what our job is as Christians, is to do that. Not to stress, but to read, figure out, spend time with him. God, what do you want from my life? I want to know you more. That's why we do Bible study. That's why we go to church. That's why we read books. That's why we do those things. Remember, not for God to make things, that we think he's going to be happy with us, unhappy if he doesn't, but because we want to. So, the disciples fell asleep. They weren't very loving. They were very prejudiced. And so I want you to, if you're here and you're like, I just feel like God hates me all the time, I want you to really honestly go plant a tree. Plant a tree in your backyard. Every morning look at it and say, you know what? That thing grows slow. I grow slow. It's all good. God loves me. I read this cute little thing. This little boy called his grandmother on her birthday. He said, Grandma, how old are you? And she said, 62. And he was really quiet for a while, and he said, did you start at 1? Okay. And I thought, that was brilliant, because it's like so many people, like, did you start at 1 in your Christian faith? And the answer is yes, we did. And it takes a long time to get to 62. Now, the great thing about, and this is the last part that I want to talk about, is those that are changing. And I want you to know that you've got all these steps, and then when you finally start getting this is what's so fun about being a Christian. The whole world can fall apart, and you can still be okay. And we get this from Marie Monville. I don't know if you remember that they just had an article in People magazine. She was the woman whose husband went to that little Amish community, I think it was 7 years ago, went in, tied up 10 kids, killed 5 of them, and here's this woman going, what just happened to my life? But the Washington Post on Faith wrote this article, and I put it in there for you, and I thought we'd read it together because it was so brilliant to me. It says Marie Monville, after growing up in an idyllic rural setting in Georgetown, Pennsylvania, a Christian girl in an Amish country, Monville says she could hardly recognize herself in the title that was suddenly being used to describe her, the shooter's wife. One thing that didn't change for Monville the day, 7 years ago today, that her husband Charlie walked into an Amish schoolhouse and then bound and shot 10 schoolgirls, killing 5 of them and then killing himself. Her sense of God's presence, not only in the everyday and mundane, but also in the depths of unfathomable despair. Now, I had to read that because they say that if you look at the very first thing, one thing that didn't change, and then you go to that last thing, was her sense of God's presence in all of that went on. She said, what emerges in reading Monville's just published account of coping with her husband's killing spree and its aftermath is a woman who didn't just cling to God in the shadow of tragedy, but someone who spent her entire life unknowingly preparing for the wreckage she would have to face. I don't think it was anything I was able to recognize in the moment, but in the time since, I could really tell that all of my life had brought to that point and prepared me for that place, Monville says. It was as if all of that investment that had gone into me, either in time I had spent praying, reading the Bible, or just in church, or conversations with my friends about the Lord, about things they were seeing him do in their lives. It was as if all of those things came together in that moment and solidified into one statement of faith and great belief for me that's carried me through the rest of my journey. And I thought, that's it right there in a nutshell. She says, all of my life, I prayed, I read, I hung out with Christians. I had people pour godly things into my life. And it prepared me for when this horrific tragedy, I didn't fall apart, I didn't go on drugs and start drinking and go into depression. I didn't do that. My roots, I always say her roots had gone so deep like that big General Sherman tree that she could withstand anything. And that's what happens as you grow up in your faith. Suddenly, you just, like I said, you see things differently, you don't look at things differently. Like as tragic as that was and horrifying as that was, she came out okay because she said, I don't know why God allowed this to happen, but I'm going to trust that there's a purpose. And I think just for us, the purpose is seeing her faith. And it all started with just reading her Bible and knowing God and being with the people. She was talking about, well, it made me think about the disciples. And I thought these guys started out, if you think about how they all started out, they were kind of all about me and they were fearful. But if you think about all the time they spent with Jesus and then they followed him after that, they all died like really horrible deaths. Like they were martyred. It was a bad deal back then. And yet, by the time they got to their death, just kill me. I know Jesus. I know all about him. I'm fine with whatever he does. And see, we can get to that point too. It's just a matter of, are we putting in the time? And that's why I'm so proud of all of you that show up at Bible study, that whether it's here or whether you make sure you're in church or you make sure you read your Bible in the morning, because those are the things that's going to catapult your faith. It's not going to happen if you don't do any of those things. It just won't. And she made that very clear, that had she not been in that environment, she wouldn't have grown in her faith to be able to handle that. It was interesting. I liked her take on this. She said when she was school shopping for her first grader, they had changed schools, and his biggest fear was, he said, Mommy, will all the kids in school know what my dad did? And she said, I had to stop and think about that for a minute. And she said, because I have this tremendous burden for my kids that I want to protect them from everything. But she said, I realized something, that was a God-sized problem, not a man-sized problem. And it's not something I could even deal with. She said, I know I can pray for them. I can equip them the very best I can. But she says, the rest I had to leave in God's completely capable hands. And when we get that, I think it just makes life so much simpler. And it just once again reminded me that she could have been bitter and angry, and she could have walked away for her faith and been mad at God and done all these awful things. But she didn't, because she had General Sherman roots. It was kind of how I look at it. So what it means to be a disciple is the same thing. It's starting out slow. We always act the same as we did. And then the Holy Spirit comes in our life and he starts changing us from the inside out. And I was thinking about this with the disciples. When they first, let's say Peter, actually most of them were fishermen. They were fishermen, and they probably hung out at the Jerusalem bar, and they had friends, and they did their party thing, whatever they did. I have no idea. But then they met Jesus. And once they did that, their lives were never the same. Their view on life actually changed. Like, their life was about the fishing business and just hanging out with my buds and doing all that kind of stuff. Now their whole agenda changed in life, and it's not so much about their life and their agenda. Now it became God's agenda. And then I started thinking their purpose changed. Like their purpose in life was to be like, now I'm going to be a fisherman. I'm going to raise my kids up and teach them how to fish and keep this business going. But now suddenly they realize they have to fish for men instead of fish for fish, because that's really important to them. Their goals changes. Instead of making a fishing kingdom, now they're building God's kingdom. So you see, when you become a Christian and a follower of Christ, everything changes. You can't be the same person that you were before. And I always want to say this, not right away. It takes time, and I want us to get that. And I want to tell you, and we'll end with this, I realize this in my own life because if you know me, I'm not a very compassionate person. Like I try to be, but it's just not natural for me. I'm kind of more of like Dusty woke up this morning and he's like, my back hurts so bad from building houses, I can't move. I'm like, take an Advil and go to school, okay? He calls me, Mama, my back hurts so bad. I'm like, take an additional Advil and get to class. Okay, so I just don't have this empathetic, I am going to take him to a chiropractor today. I canceled basketball, so I'm not totally pathetic. But it's not my natural thing to just be like, oh, let me come get you and hug you and hold you. It's just, I'm just like, get over it. Okay, so that's just me. So if any of you, has anyone seen the new Captain Phillips movie? My brother actually, someone told me this, I wasn't there. He walked up to buy tickets and he said, I'd like 8 tickets to Captain Morgan. And no one said anything, they just knew what he was talking about. Anyway, we went to see, and if you don't know the story, if you remember, it was the pirates that went and took the big cargo ship and Captain Phillips, and they took him on that little boat, I can't remember the name of it, that came off, and the Navy SEALs went and killed the 3 of the guys. What I didn't realize is that they were trying to negotiate with one of them. They had pulled one of the kids off of and taken it to the main Navy ship, so they killed the 3. Now, when the whole movie was over, I found myself being so sad, not for Captain Phillips or the families, and it was a scene at the end where, everyone was in tears, just the things that Phillips had to go through. My sadness, I walked out, was for the pirates. I was so heartbroken because at the very beginning of the movie, you see this scene where they're just in this African little camp, and these bad guys with guns came in and they're forced to go pirate. They're kids, for crying out loud. They have no choice in the matter, and it broke my heart. And so at the end of the movie, I said, oh my gosh, the one guy lived. He's in prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. So I said, okay, he's on my prayer list. I'm going to pray for him every day that God will save him, because and most people, and me in the olden days would be like, oh, what an idiot. He shouldn't have done that. You should have some kind of moral compass in your life. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But I realized then that Jesus changes lives, because in my own natural humanness, I would never have empathy for someone like that. But suddenly he became a frog on my thing in my pool. And I realized that that's what happens when Jesus, he comes in your life and he changes you. I thought of Hillsong's song. They sing a song called Hosanna. And I wrote some of the words out. I didn't put it in yours because I did this afterwards. But I thought if we could get this, that this is what we need to ask God for. Part of the song says, heal my heart and make it clean. And I think that's what we should be praying. God, I want you to heal my heart. I want you to make it clean. I want to be different than everyone. This was the second verse. Open up my eyes to the things unseen. I want us to be able to say, God, open up my eyes to see, like Elisha. He could see things in a spiritual realm that I can't see. Help me to see the people that are around me. They're sad, they're lonely, they're depressed, there's problems. Help me to see what the problem is so I can help them. Let me put on my spiritual glasses. Show me how to love like you have loved me. Okay, show me how to love others and be compassionate and gracious and like you have loved me. It says, break my heart for what breaks yours. What breaks God's heart? Just people that don't know him, sin, the world, sadness. There's a lot of sad things. The kids were in Mexico and they were building homes, and they came home and Rob said, what's the greatest thing you learned? I'm so thankful for my family, and I'm thankful for my bed and my bathtub, things that we wouldn't even, but it's kind of like, break my heart, God, for what breaks yours. And I know you're sad that people live in poverty. What can I do to help? Okay? And then the very end of it says, everything I am for your kingdom's cause. Everything I am, God, is all about you. So, the thing that God gives us the ability to do, we have 1 minute. I had to put this other little e-card in there because I thought that was so funny. This woman looks at this man, and it looks like they're getting ready to get married, and she says, "You're the man I want our children to spend their weekends with." And I thought it was like that. Nobody goes into marriage like that. But unfortunately, a lot of people are married and divorced. But you know what? When I read that, I thought, God gives you the ability to love your ex, whoever that may be. He just does. You don't think he can, but that's that whole, God, give me eyes to help me love him like you've loved me. He gives you the ability to quit an addiction or to not fear, or he gives you the ability to actually care where somebody spends eternity. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And I just want to say that for those of you that are brand new, that are this size baby Christians, relax. Enjoy your walk with God. Do not let people put all this pressure on you saying you have to do all of these things to make God happy. It's not the way it works, okay? Attach yourself to Jesus and you're good to go. Next week, we're going to talk about it'll be our last week on this whole thing, and it's going to be kind of a weird week. It's going to be all the difficult sayings that Jesus says, and one of them is like, eat my flesh and drink my blood, and people are like, that's disgusting and weird. So we're going to deal with the hard sayings that he said, because as a disciple, you and I are going to be hit with some really hard things, and we're going to say, am I going to follow what Jesus says, or am I not? All right. Hope you enjoyed that lesson, and hopefully you can start seeing now that when we claim to be a follower of Jesus, something begins to change in our life. It has to, because we always say, the Holy Spirit, God himself, has moved into our life. We're learning all of these important lessons from the early disciples. So we're glad you could join us today, and we'll see you next week.